I co-signed my son's $290,000 mortgage so he could buy a home for his family. He secretly refinanced, pulled out $80,000, spent every dollar, and then stopped paying. I put my retirement and my credit on the line so my son could own a home. He thanked me by destroying both without a single warning. My name is Walter Okafor. I'm 64 years old. 3 years ago, I co-signed my son's mortgage so his family could own a home. I understood exactly what co-signing meant. I had done my homework. I was not a naive man walking into a transaction he didn't understand. I was a father who understood the legal exposure completely and made the decision anyway, because I trusted my son and I wanted my grandchildren to have a stable place to grow up. Last year, I found out that my son had secretly refinanced that mortgage without telling me. He pulled $80,000 in equity out of the house. He spent almost all of it. A failing business, gambling, things that left nothing behind. 8 months after the refinance, he stopped making payments. The house went into foreclosure. My credit score fell from 811 to 590 in less than a year. I was planning to retire at 65. That plan is now in pieces. My own home equity line, which I had used carefully and conservatively for years, is now compromised because my credit collapse changed the terms of everything attached to my name. When I confronted my son, he said, "I didn't have a choice. Things got bad. You have your pension. You'll be okay. You'll be okay." I am 64 years old. My credit is destroyed. My retirement is in jeopardy. And my son looked me in the face and told me I would be okay. This is the story of what happens when you trust the wrong person. And what makes it unbearable is that the wrong person was the one you raised. To understand this story fully, you need to understand where I come from and what I built. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and I came to the United States when I was 23 years old with one suitcase, a degree in civil engineering from the University of Lagos, and $400 in cash. I had an uncle in Columbus who let me sleep on his couch for 3 months while I found work. I found work. I spent the next 4 decades building a life in Columbus. I worked as an engineer for a municipal infrastructure firm for 31 years. I designed drainage systems, road foundations, utility corridors. Work that is invisible when it functions correctly, which is most of the time, if you do it right, and only noticed when it fails. I like that about it. I like the idea that good work could be quiet. That doing your job well meant people moved through their days without ever thinking about what was holding the ground up under them. I lived carefully. I saved consistently. I married a woman named Gloria, the finest person I have ever known, and we built a home and a life and raised 2 children together. My daughter Adiz lives in Atlanta. She is 38 years old, an accountant, and she has the same disciplined relationship with money that her mother and I tried to model. She is not part of this story, except as someone who saw what was coming before I did and told me so in plain language that I did not take seriously enough. My son Derek is 35. He is my second child and my only son, and I loved him in that particular way that fathers sometimes love sons, with a fullness that made it hard, for many years, to see him clearly. Gloria used to say, gently, that I gave Derek more benefit of the doubt than the evidence warranted. She was right. She was almost always right about things like that. Derek is talented. I want to say that first, before anything else, because it is true and because the story I am about to tell makes it easy to forget. He is genuinely creative, a fast thinker, a person with real intelligence and real charisma. He can walk into a room and make people feel immediately at ease. He has always been able to make you believe in whatever he is currently believing in, which is a powerful quality and also, as I have come to understand, a dangerous one in a person who lacks the discipline to match his enthusiasm. Growing up, he was the child who got away with things not through cunning but through warmth. His teachers liked him. His coaches liked him. People were drawn to him in the way people are drawn to someone who makes them feel that they are seen and understood. He had the gift of full attention. When Derek was talking to you, you felt like the most interesting person in the room. That gift served him well in his early years and has been the thing, I think, that has most consistently helped him avoid facing the consequences of his decisions, because people who like you find it difficult to hold you to account. The problem with Derek, the problem that has followed him through his entire adult life, is that he is better at starting things than finishing them. He has had, by my count, 6 significant business ventures since he was 22 years old. Not all of them failed completely. 2 of them showed genuine promise in the early stages. But none of them became sustainable, and each time one ended, he pivoted quickly to the next idea with the same enthusiasm and the same conviction and the same unwillingness to conduct an honest examination of what had gone wrong before. I funded, at various points over the years, a small amount of 3 of these ventures. Never a large amount. Never more than I could afford to write off entirely if the business did not work out. I made a rule for myself early on, which I had learned from watching other immigrant fathers make the mistake of overextending for their children. That family financial support should only ever come from money you could afford to lose without it changing your life. I followed that rule. Until the cosign. The cosign was different. The cosign was not money I could afford to lose. It was my name on someone else's obligation, with no ceiling on the exposure. I understood that when I signed it. I told myself I understood it, and that my trust in Derek was earned and sufficient. I was wrong about the second part. He married Priya when he was 29. She is from Columbus originally, a dental hygienist, steady and hardworking and genuinely kind. I have always liked Priya. I liked her partly because she seemed to ground Derek in ways that I had not been able to. She was practical where he was optimistic. She asked questions he preferred to skip over. She had the quality of clear-eyed affection that makes a good partner rather than just an admiring one. I thought her presence in his life was stabilizing him. I thought her presence was one of the main reasons the cosign was a reasonable risk. I did not know then that Derek had been hiding things from her too. They have 2 children. My granddaughter Amara, who is now 7, and my grandson Kofi, who turned 4 last spring. They are the joy of my later years in the way that grandchildren are. Uncomplicated, unearned, a gift that arrives when you are finally patient enough to fully appreciate it. When Amara was 3 and Priya was pregnant with Kofi, Derek came to me with the idea of buying a house. He and Priya had been renting a 2-bedroom apartment for 4 years. It was fine, but it was small, and they wanted stability, a yard, better schools, a place that was theirs. Derek had been doing freelance marketing work for several years, and while his income was real, it was inconsistent. He had a good year, and a lean year, and a good year again, and the mortgage lenders saw that inconsistency and declined to approve him for the loan they needed. Priya's income was steady but not large enough on its own to qualify for the size of home they wanted in the neighborhood they had identified. Derek asked me to co-sign. I want to describe the conversation we had, because I think the details of it matter. We sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon. Priya was not there. It was Derek and me, as it had been for most of the significant conversations in his life. He explained the situation clearly. The house was listed at $290,000. With the down payment they had saved, which was modest but real, about $28,000 accumulated over 4 years of Priya's steady income and Derek's better freelance months. The loan amount would be $262,000. My co-signature would allow them to qualify at a favorable interest rate. I asked him questions. I asked about his current income and his projected income for the next 2 to 3 years. I asked about his monthly expenses and what the mortgage payment would represent as a percentage of their combined household income. I asked whether Priya had reviewed the complete financial picture and was fully in agreement. I asked about his employment situation, whether there was any possibility of the freelance income becoming more stable or whether it might decline. He answered all of them, patiently, thoroughly. He had prepared, I realized, for this conversation. He had brought documents, his last 2 years of tax returns, a breakdown of his current projects, a budget spreadsheet Priya had put together. The preparation itself reassured me. The Derek who prepared for hard conversations was the Derek I wanted to believe was the dominant version. Then I said what I needed to say. Derek, if I do this, I need you to understand fully what it means. This is not a favor you can undo. If you miss payments, it is my credit that suffers. If this loan goes wrong in any way, I am legally responsible for the full amount. You need to treat this as the most serious financial commitment of your adult life, and you need to make every payment on time without exception, and you need to never, not ever, take any action on this mortgage, any refinancing, any modification, any change of any kind, without talking to me first, not afterward. before. Do you understand that? He looked at me the way he has always looked at me when he is being sincere. Directly, steadily, without deflection. I understand, Dad. I promise. This means everything to our family. I will not let you down. I believed him. I signed the documents. For 3 years, as far as I knew, everything was fine. The payments came through on time every month. Derek and Priya moved into the house, painted it, put in a small vegetable garden on the south side that Priya tended carefully and that produced more tomatoes than they could eat. The children had a yard. I spent Sunday afternoons there sometimes, watching Amara and Kofi play in the grass while Priya brought iced tea and Derek talked about whatever he was working on. And I felt the particular satisfaction of a man who sees the concrete results of a decision he made. I thought the decision had worked out. I was looking at the surface of things. Underneath, for at least 14 of those 36 months, something else entirely had been building. The refinancing document arrived on a Thursday in November. It came to my address because, as co-signer on the original mortgage, I was still listed in some of the lender's records as a notification contact. Not all lenders remove the co-signer's contact information when a loan is refinanced away from that co-signer. Some do. This one had not. A document outlining the terms of the new loan arrived in my mailbox in a white envelope with the name of a bank I did not recognize, not the original lender. I opened it because my name was on it. I read it standing at my mailbox in the cold November air in my coat because I did not go back inside first. I do not know why I did not go inside. Some instinct that the distance was needed, that I should read whatever this was before I was surrounded by the familiar walls of my house. Derek had refinanced the mortgage 7 weeks earlier. The new loan was for $330,000, substantially more than the original loan amount, because the house had appreciated in value over the 3 years since purchase. The appraised value on the refinancing document showed a number high enough that Derek had qualified for the new loan on his own financial profile without my co-signature. He had extracted approximately $80,000 in equity through a cash-out refinance. I was not on the new loan. He had refinanced it in his name only, which was his legal right. When the original mortgage was paid off through the refinancing, my obligation on that loan technically ended. Technically, the practical consequences of what had already been set in motion, of course, did not end with the technical legal structure. Credit reporting works in more complicated ways than that. I stood at the mailbox and I read the document twice. I am an engineer. I read things carefully before I respond to them. I wanted to be certain I understood what I was reading before I acted on it. I understood it. 7 weeks. He had done this 7 weeks ago. We had spoken in those 7 weeks. He had called me about Kofi's upcoming birthday. We had talked about a football game. He had said nothing. I called him immediately. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I drove to the house. Priya answered the door. She looked at my face and her expression shifted, not with guilt, exactly, but with the particular discomfort of someone who knows something that is about to be said out loud. Derek appeared behind her a moment later. "Dad," he said, "come in." "Did you refinance the mortgage?" I asked. I did not go inside. A pause. "Yes." Without telling me. "I was going to tell you." "When?" He didn't answer that. "How much did you take out?" I already knew from the document. I wanted to hear him say it. "About 80,000. "About 80,000. "And where is it?" Another pause. Longer. "I've been working on something. A business. It needed capital." "What business, Derek?" The explanation that followed took about 20 minutes. I stood on his front porch the entire time because I did not trust myself to be inside his house, where my grandchildren's drawings were on the refrigerator and the smell of Priya's cooking was in the air and the normal textures of a family life were present and would make it harder to hear clearly what I was hearing. There was an e-commerce business. He had been importing specialty goods, handmade textiles, artisan food products, things positioned at the premium end of a market he had researched and believed in. He had been running this business for approximately 14 months without telling Priya about it or mentioning it to me. He had incorporated it under a name I did not recognize, using an address I had never heard. He had used a significant portion of the equity to fund the inventory, the website infrastructure, the digital advertising. The business had not performed. The market he had identified was more competitive than his research suggested. His advertising spend was high and his conversion rates were low. He made adjustments, new product lines, different platforms, revised pricing. None of it turned the curve. He had lost most of what he invested over approximately 9 months of trying to make it work. He did not tell Priya because he intended to fix it before she needed to know. He did not tell me because he had promised to never take action on the mortgage without telling me. And telling me about the refinance would have required him to tell me about the business, and he was not ready to do either of those things. I asked him directly, "When did you know it was failing?" "About 6 months in," he said. "Maybe 7. So for the last 7 or 8 months of the business's life, you knew it wasn't going to work and you continued spending money that came from my co-signed mortgage." He didn't answer that directly. He said the pivot strategies had seemed promising. He said there were moments when he thought it was going to turn around. There were also gambling losses. Online sports betting, primarily. He had started using the platform during the pandemic, casually at first, the way he described it, as a form of entertainment during a period when there was not much else to do and the stakes were small. Then the stakes grew. Then the frequency grew. Then he was betting on games he had no particular knowledge of because the action itself had become the point, not the outcome. He did not use the word addiction. He said he had made some bad bets. He said it got away from him for a while. He said he had it under control now. I had heard variations of that sentence from Derek before. About the businesses. About spending. It was the sentence he used when something had gotten bad enough that he could no longer deny it, but not bad enough that he was ready to fully own it. It got away from me for a while. As if the situation were a separate entity that had escaped his supervision rather than a series of choices he had made one after another after another. The rest of the equity, roughly $20,000 by his accounting, though I had reason to believe his accounting was optimistic, had gone to credit card debt he had been carrying quietly, car repairs, and what he called just regular life stuff that got out of hand. He set it all on my son's porch, in the November cold, with the lights on behind him in the house I had helped him buy, in what I recognized even then as the particular relief of a person who has been carrying a secret too long and is finally, however involuntarily, setting it down. I did not feel relief standing there. I felt the specific weight of a man who has been told that the thing he was most certain of was the thing that wasn't true. "Derek," I said, when he was done, "are you still making the payments on the new loan?" He was quiet. "We're behind," he said. 2 months. That was in November. By February, they were 5 months behind. By April, the foreclosure proceedings had begun. I found out about most of this not from Derek, but from letters that continued to arrive at my address. Not because I was on the new loan, but because my name remained in certain records from the original transaction, and some notifications continued to route to me. Legal correspondence. Notices from the county recorder's office. Documents that told me the story in sequence, one envelope at a time, each one arriving like another sentence in a narrative I had not been asked to be part of, but could not stop receiving. I kept them, every one, in a folder in the filing cabinet next to the original co-sign agreement. I do not know exactly why I kept them. Partly the engineer's instinct to document everything, to maintain a record, to not rely on memory alone for something this consequential. Partly because they were the only honest account of what had happened, and honest accounts mattered to me even when, especially when, the honest account was one I would have preferred not to have. My credit score, which I had built over 4 decades of careful, disciplined financial management, 811 at its peak, a number I was genuinely proud of, not out of vanity, but because it represented 40 years of keeping my word to every lender and creditor I had ever dealt with, began to fall. It fell because even though I was not on the new loan, the original mortgage default had created reporting complications. My credit file was attached to an account with a derogatory history. The original loan's payment record, which had been excellent for 3 years before the refinance, was now part of a file that included foreclosure-related notations. The details of credit damage are technical and specific, and they vary by circumstance, but the bottom line was not technical. The bottom line was a number: 590. From 811 to 590 in less than a year. I am a civil engineer. I understand systems. I understand how components interact with each other, and how a failure in one part of a structure affects the integrity of parts that seemed separate and safe. I had spent 31 years designing infrastructure that anticipated failure modes, redundant drainage channels, load distribution across multiple supports, clearance margins built above the expected need. The job of a good engineer is to assume that something unexpected will go wrong and to build in a way that contains the damage when it does. What Derek did to the mortgage was not isolated to the mortgage. It traveled through my financial life the way structural damage travels through a building, finding the connections, exploiting the dependencies, reaching the parts that seemed entirely separate and demonstrating that they were not. The home equity line of credit on my own home, a line I had used responsibly for years, borrowing modestly and repaying reliably, maintaining it as the kind of conservative financial buffer that a careful person keeps available without overusing, came up for renewal while my credit was in freefall. The bank offered me revised terms that were substantially less favorable. I accepted them because I had no other option. The cost of borrowing against my own home, a home I have owned for 26 years and have paid down carefully and legitimately, increased significantly because of what my son did to a different property. The irony of that, as an engineer, was not lost on me. The structural failure was somewhere else. My house was standing. My foundation was sound. But the credit profile that determined the terms of everything attached to my name had been compromised, and the bank did not distinguish between what I had done and what had been done to me. My retirement plan, the plan Gloria and I had built together over decades, and that I had maintained carefully in the years since she died, was not destroyed. I want to be precise about that. My pension is not gone. I will retire. But the plan I had constructed, the specific timeline and the specific financial flexibility I had worked toward, has been disrupted in ways that will require adjustments I had not planned for and do not welcome at this stage of my life. The credit repair attorney I consulted told me that meaningful recovery takes approximately 3 years from the date the derogatory items are resolved. I will be 67 before my credit reflects who I actually am rather than what my son did to a house. 3 years. That is the period in which I had planned to transition out of full-time work, settle into a different pace, perhaps travel, perhaps spend more time in Lagos seeing the family I have not seen in too long. Those plans are not canceled. They are delayed and revised and constrained in ways I did not choose. I confronted Derek in June. By that point, the house was in foreclosure, and Priya had taken the children to her parents' home in Dublin, Ohio, because the marriage was in crisis. Derek was living in the house in foreclosure, as if remaining in it long enough would change the trajectory. We sat in his kitchen, the same kitchen where I had watched my grandchildren eat breakfast, the same table. He was sorry. I believe he was genuinely sorry. I have known Derek for 35 years, and I know what his genuine emotions look like. And what I saw in that kitchen was not performance. It was a man who had made catastrophic decisions and was now sitting inside the consequences of them and felt terrible. Feeling terrible was not enough. "You made me a promise," I said, "at my kitchen table. You looked at me directly and you told me you would never make any change to that mortgage without telling me. Do you remember saying that?" "Yes." "And when you went to that bank and signed the refinance documents, you knew you were breaking that promise." A long silence. "I thought I could fix it before you found out," he said. "I thought the business was going to work. I thought I could put the money back." "Put it back how? You cannot put equity back, Derek. That is not how it works." "I know that now." "You knew it then. You are not a stupid man." He looked at the table. "I was in a bad place. The gambling. I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought if I had enough capital the business would take off and I could cover everything and pay back the equity and you'd never have to know what happened." "And if the business had taken off, you still would have refinanced my co-signed mortgage without telling me. The deception would have been the same. Only the consequences would have been different." He didn't have an answer for that. "You have your pension," he said, eventually. "You're going to be okay." I looked at him for a moment. "Derek, my credit score is 590. I built that score over 40 years. Your mother and I built it together. I cannot qualify for anything with that number. The line of credit on my home, the home I have owned since before you were born, is now more expensive because of what you did. My retirement plan is disrupted, and you are telling me I will be okay. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." I know you are. I left. I have not been back. I want to talk about Priya and the grandchildren, because they are the part of this that is hardest to carry and the part that almost no one asks about. Priya did not know about the business. She did not know about the gambling. Not fully, though she had suspected something was wrong for months before the refinancing document exposed the scope of it. She had noticed money being tighter than it should have been. She had noticed Derek being evasive about their finances in ways she had chalked up to stress rather than deception. She had asked questions that he had answered in ways that were technically not lies, but were not the truth, and she had accepted those answers because she trusted him. The same mistake I made, for similar reasons, in a different form. She found out the scope of it the same way I found out, through the consequences arriving faster than the explanations. Priya is a good person who made a good faith choice to build a life with my son, and the consequences of his decisions have fallen on her in ways that are not her fault, and are not mine, and are not the children's. She and the grandchildren are at her parents' home in Dublin. She has filed for divorce. The process is ongoing, and I do not insert myself into it except to make myself available to the children in whatever way she and the circumstances allow. My relationship with Amara and Kofi is the part of this situation that I tend most carefully, because they are 7 and 4 years old and they did not do anything wrong, and they deserve a grandfather who shows up for them without the shadow of this story falling over every visit. I see them. Priya facilitates it generously, more generously than I might have managed in her position. I pick up Amara from school on Tuesdays when Priya has long shifts. I have Kofi on weekend mornings when the schedule allows. I am present in their lives in the ways I can be. I read to Kofi, and I help Amara with her reading as well. And on the Tuesdays when I pick her up, she tells me about her day with the unhesitating thoroughness that 7-year-olds bring to narrating their lives, and I listen to every word, because the irreplaceable thing about being present for a child is simply being present, nothing more complicated than that. They are not touched by what happened between their father and me. That is the only part of this entire situation that is purely good. I do not speak to Derek, not because I made a formal decision about this in a single moment, but because every time I have attempted contact in the months since June, the conversation has moved in one of two directions, either toward Derek asking for something he needs, financially or otherwise, or toward Derek explaining again how sorry he is in a way that seems more focused on his own relief than on any actual reckoning with what he did. At my age, I do not have the energy to manage my son's emotional processing of his own choices at the cost of my own peace. That is a sentence I could not have said at 50. At 40, you get to a point in life where you understand the difference between love and obligation, and between standing by someone and allowing yourself to be used as the cushion that absorbs the impact of their decisions. I stood by Derek for 35 years. I gave him money I did not announce publicly. I supported his businesses with encouragement and occasionally with small amounts of capital. I co-signed a mortgage and accepted the legal exposure that came with it, out of love and trust and the belief that the person I had raised would honor what that meant. He did not honor it. He took $80,000 from a house I helped him buy. He took it quietly, privately, without a word to me or to his wife. He spent it on a failing business and on gambling losses and on the general entropy of a life that had been heading in this direction for longer than I wanted to see. And when it collapsed, he sat at a kitchen table and told me I would be okay. I have thought a great deal in the months since about what I missed. Because I am an honest man and I know that a story like this does not happen without warning signs that someone chose not to see. Adiz told me, that is the most direct version of the truth. My daughter called me 3 years ago when Derek first asked me to co-sign, and said, "Dad, I love Derek, but you know how he is with money. You know how he is with ideas. Please think carefully about whether putting your name on a 30-year obligation for him is the right decision." I told her she was being uncharitable. I told her Derek had matured. I told her that Priya was a steadying influence and that having children had given him real responsibility and that this situation was different from the previous ones. She listened. She did not argue with me. She said quietly, "I hope you're right." And she left it there because she knows me, and she knew that pushing harder would only make me more certain in my position. She was not right about the specific details. She did not predict the refinance or the gambling or the precise sequence that unfolded. But she was right about the fundamental thing. Derek's relationship with money and with consequences had not changed in the ways I had convinced myself it had. His charm and his optimism and his ability to make you feel that everything was under control had not changed either. I had confused the presentation with the substance, which is something he has always made it easy to do. I did not listen to Adiz. That is my part in this. Not a large part. The decisions Derek made were his decisions, made by a grown man who knew exactly what he was promising when he sat at my kitchen table and looked me in the eye. But I contributed to the situation by overriding the judgment of someone with clearer sight than mine because I wanted to believe in my son more than I wanted to see him accurately. Gloria would have seen it. She had the particular clarity about the children that I lacked, specifically where Derek was concerned. She loved him without the blind spot. She could hold the full, accurate picture of who he was and love him simultaneously, which is a skill I admire and have never quite mastered where he is involved. She used to say to me, in her careful way, that the most useful thing a parent could do for a child who struggled with consequences was to stop absorbing those consequences on their behalf. That cushioning a person from the results of their choices was not love. It was something that looked like love from the inside but functioned as harm over time. I heard her say it. I even agreed with it in principle. I just did not apply it consistently to Derek, because with Derek, I always found a reason why this particular situation was different from the principle. Gloria died 4 years before any of this happened. She had known for 2 years that her heart was failing, and she carried that knowledge the way she carried most difficult things, directly, practically, without theater. She made her arrangements. She said the things she needed to say. She died at home, with me present, and while it was not easy, it was honest, which was consistent with who she had always been. She is spared this particular chapter. That is a mercy I acknowledge even when I am not grateful for the cost of it. There are things I would have told her if she had been here when this happened. Not for comfort, though I would have wanted the comfort. To think it through out loud with someone who knew all the parties and could hold the whole truth without needing it to be simpler than it is. She was good at that, better than anyone I have known. I carry that loss alongside this one. They are separate griefs, and they are also connected, in the way that the absence of the person who would best help you navigate a loss makes the loss itself larger. A man at this stage of life rebuilds in a specific way, slowly, carefully, without the luxury of a long horizon. I have consulted a financial advisor. I have a credit repair strategy in place. The timeline to meaningful recovery is approximately 3 years, which means I will be 67 before my credit reflects who I actually am rather than what my son did to a house. I have Amara and Kofi on Tuesdays and weekends. I have Adiz in Atlanta, who calls me every Sunday evening and who I can hear, in the careful way she asks how I am doing, is checking on me in the way that daughters check on fathers who have been hurt. She does not say I told you so. She is not that kind of person and has never been. She just calls. That matters more than she knows. I have the work I did for 40 years, the infrastructure projects, the roads and bridges and water systems I spent my career designing and overseeing. Things that are still there. Things that still function. Things that do not depend on whether the people I built them for kept their promises to me. There is a retention basin on the east side of Columbus that I designed in my 22nd year with the firm, when I was still young enough to feel uncertain about whether my calculations were correct. It is still there. It still holds. It has managed every significant rainfall event in that area for over 2 decades without failing. No one drives past it and thinks about who designed it. They do not need to. That is the point. You build what you can build. You do the work in front of you. You make sure that what you leave behind is solid enough to serve the people who depend on it. I did that for 40 years professionally. I tried to do it personally as well. One of those efforts held. The other one is in foreclosure. I still believe in building things. I still believe that love expressed through concrete action, through showing up, through signing your name when it is needed, through putting your resources behind the people you care about, is the right way to live. Not because it always works out. I am standing in the evidence that it does not always work out. But because the alternative, to keep your name off of things, to guard everything, to love at a safe distance that protects your credit score but forfeits the fullness of what family is supposed to mean, is not a life I want to have lived. When I came to this country with $400 in cash and one suitcase and slept on my uncle's couch, I had nothing but the willingness to trust that building something was possible. That willingness has not left me. Even now, it has been modified by what happened, and it will be more careful going forward, but it has not left me. I just wish the person I built for had understood what it cost to build. Derek is out there somewhere. In the house still, or no longer in it. I do not always know, and I have stopped tracking it. He calls occasionally. I let it go to voicemail, mostly. Sometimes I listen to the messages. He is sorry. He is going to make it right. He is getting help for the gambling. He wants to see me. I believe the sorry is genuine. I believe the help seeking is real, at least in intention. I believe he wants to see me in the complicated way that people want things when they have done serious damage and need the person they damaged to still be present in their life. What I do not yet know is whether I can give him what he needs without losing more of what I have left to protect. That is not a question with an easy answer. It is not a question I am ready to answer today. Maybe someday I will be ready to sit across from him without the weight of what he did being the loudest presence in the room. Maybe the day will come when the man I remember, the boy who grew into a man I was proud of, most of the time, most of the years, will be easier to see through what happened. That day is not today. Today I pick up my granddaughter from school on Tuesdays. I watch my grandson on weekends. I talk to Adiz on Sunday evenings. I work with the financial advisor on the credit recovery. I tend my house, which I have owned for 26 years and intend to own for whatever years I have left. I am not finished. But I am tired in a way I was not tired before. Tired in the particular way of a person who trusted carefully and was still wrong. Who did his homework and still could not protect himself from the specific kind of damage that someone who loves you can do when they stop being honest. And there is a document in my filing cabinet, the original co-sign agreement, the one I signed at a bank on a Tuesday afternoon 3 years ago while my son watched and said thank you, that I have not been able to bring myself to throw away, even though there is no practical reason to keep it now. I keep it because it is the record of a promise. Not his promise to me, though that is in there too, and he broke it. My promise to him, the one I made and honored and kept, from the first signature to the last consequence. I want it on record, somewhere, that I kept mine. Have you ever put your name and your credit and your retirement on the line for someone you loved, only to have them destroy it without a single warning? Have you ever trusted the wrong person and found out too late that the warning signs were there all along? Have you ever loved someone completely and still had to walk away to protect what little was left? Share your story in the comments. Because sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you would have done anything for. If you believe that a man who co-signs for his son out of love deserves better than to find out through a piece of mail what was done to him, hit that like button and subscribe. Because trust is the most expensive thing one person can give another. And when it is broken this way, by someone this close, the cost does not end with the credit score. Hashtag he co-signed for his son.